Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. I was going to do this in my living room, but I think the Vic was a better idea. It is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces. I look around. I don't know if JP, the camera, can catch this. Thank you so much for all the support all these years. Yes, it's been years. But I also see many unfamiliar faces. But you look very friendly, so thank you for being here today. I'm Paxi, and my book, Impact X, is available on Amazon.com today. And here it is. As you can see, very odd size here. I went a little overboard as a first-time author. But then I was sitting waiting for a meeting to happen, and somebody in here will know who it is because this quote appeared. And so I was thinking just to stick with what I was doing because this must have been a sign. So this is the book. You know, having lived here for 10 years in the United States, I think I still don't have the centimeters to inches conversion down, so. But I know you all have these very nifty devices, and this is the other version. Look at this, right? So this is basically a USB stick, and it has a PDF format on it, the exact same format with the beautiful photographs and layout. You don't even need a Kindle or a Nook to read this one. I highly encourage you to get this one. It's inexpensive, it's very light, and it's serves as jewelry, I guess. So bring one for your wife. So why this book? Can I bring this up? Is that okay? Can I touch this? So why this book? I'm sure you all have experienced this, that when you travel, people ask you where you're from. Maybe it's just only me, but they do this all the time. Where are you from? And I always say, I'm from the Netherlands, but I live in Santa Barbara. Now, people usually don't give, a bit about the Netherlands part, but I have noticed that when you say Santa Barbara, people just immediately light up. And the next time, you should pay attention because, I don't know if you've noticed this, a lot of people then proceed to sell you to the place that you actually live in. So they'll talk about this beautiful city nestled between the ocean and the mountains and the whitewashed buildings and the perfect weather. But after having lived here for a decade, I really think Santa Barbara is not just special because of its geographic location and its beautiful weather. Santa Barbara is special because of you. And I say this because after 8 years of community involvement, I've been exposed to your incredible life stories, and I have witnessed this amazing commitment to giving. So I thank you for all you do for our community in making and keeping it special. And then a couple of years ago, I found myself in a Santa Barbara garden, and it was beautiful weather, and I was standing under a dimly lit tree, inches away from 9-time Grammy Award winner, jazz maestro Wynton Marsalis. And so he didn't quite look like this that evening. I didn't quite look like this that evening either. I don't know what possessed me, to be really honest with you. I had my bag with me, I whipped out my phone, and I asked him if I could record our conversation. And just to date this, I never even used the recorder on my phone, and it was a BlackBerry even, so you know how long a time this was. But he said yes, and we talked about giving. And it was a very brief chat, but that chat propelled me to connect and seek and speak with equally inspiring people over the next couple of years. And here they are. Thank you. And some of them are here with us today. So what I would like to do today is to give you an opportunity to connect with these impact makers and to have a chat with them the way I have a couple of years back. So before I do this, I would like to just go over a couple of things that I've learned along the way by speaking with many of you and the people who are profiled in the book. You'll bring up the slide. So tackling social issues requires cross-sector collaborative efforts. And I have actually seen people from opposite of the political spectrum work together just because they had a shared passion. And there's no individual strength without community support. I'm a perfect example of that. And there is and the community can only be healthy with the support of the individual. And I know all these because after I wrote these and I looked at them, I was like, gosh, these are such a bunch of cliche, especially the last one. But you know, I've spoken to so many people, donors, volunteers, executives of nonprofits, entrepreneurs, even a US presidential award winner, and they all said in every conversation, every voice matters and everyone can make a difference. So this is what I learned, and as you all invest your wealth, your wisdom, and your work in the causes that you care about, I would encourage you also to think about the following, and that is your role as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as an employee, as a consumer, because those voices are the most powerful ones to make change happen in our community and in the world. So that is why I am so thrilled that we have with us Marcello Palazzi. He's also featured in the book. And it's kind of a miracle that we have him here because he's an Italian living in the Netherlands. But recently, he's been appointed a Stanford University Fellow. And he's the perfect person to speak to you about these next generation businesses that drive purpose beyond profit. And so please help me welcome Marcello Palazzi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
no, I mean,
you know what?
She's the lady who inspires me too. So congratulations for having brought all these people here. It's amazing, you know. Thank you. So
Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here actually. And I said to Paxi, the last time I was in Santa Barbara was in 1994, and I was in a house up the hills, and suddenly we had this earthquake coming. So that was my memory of Santa Barbara. I had been here before because my sister used to live in LA, and so we would drive up from time to time. So anyway, it's great. It's amazing that you've come, all of you here, to listen about inspirational impact. So I'll do my little bit and share my story as someone is helping me with the slide. So this is a bit about my biography. Basically, for me, the essence is I grew up in an entrepreneurial family in northern Italy, went to school in Switzerland, and when I was studying in London, economics, it didn't make sense. The economics I was studying sort of was not connected with my values and my ethics, so I kept searching and researching about business families, entrepreneurs who somehow had managed to make that connection between who they were themselves, their kind of purpose in life, and their work as business people. And that led me to write a paper about family businesses going back, a couple of 100 years. And at the time I was running part of a family business. I started a separate company in London that we produced laboratories for water testing, soil testing. Actually, one of the first companies in Europe to do that. This is 25, 26 years ago. And but my heart really was about this entrepreneurship and the public good, which has remained my big passion. So I started a foundation with a Dutch friend of mine in 1989 around public-private partnerships, which in the last 25 years has done about 300 projects in 30 countries with the UN, with corporation, with foundation, with civil society. And the essence is, how do we make entrepreneurship work for the wider public good? And it's been always a very exciting journey. And the last chapter for me is the last year and a half. I had met in New York 3 young entrepreneurs who all studied at Stanford and started this group. You can go to the next slide, please. they started the B Lab, which is the kind of mother organization of the B Corps, the so-called benefit corporations. And in a moment, I'll show you the slide about, or various slides of what are these B Corps. But here, the essence, I call it next generation business. It's basically about integrating, the human aspiration, a bit like, I must say, on Saturday, Tim Cook spoke at George Washington University, and he said, this was in a way what people never really understood of Steve Jobs. He was an idealist at heart. And his sentence, want to make a dent in the universe, was kind of captures that idea that we are not here just to live an ordinary life. Each one of us has the potential to actually live great lives and do great things and make a little contribution to the world. And it's actually very interesting that Tim Cook himself actually he saw the light, as it were, when he started working for Apple, that it was possible to run a technology company and still be following your heart and your purpose, which is actually a very powerful story. So the B Corps, which is about 3,000 companies now, they are mostly family businesses, small-sized companies, all driven by this purpose and purpose and profit, we say. So it's about this aspiration. How do we kind of unleash aspiration, particularly, now I'm doing this fellowship at Stanford. I speak with MBAs all the time. Many of them don't really know what they're going to be doing. They are looking for their purpose in life. And I sort of share some of these stories of the B Corps, and that they're very inspiring. So it's actually helping young people find the kind of aspiration or how they can utilize their talents in a way which is useful to society and, of course, useful to themselves as entrepreneurs. So aspiration, human-centered, clearly, the human center and this clean about transparent, sustainable. We all know the challenges, climate change, inequalities, billions of people who still don't have access to electricity in the world. So bottom of the pyramid countries where entrepreneurship can be actually very powerful as an instrument to help people live prosperous lives. Next, please. So my journey, 25 years around is entrepreneurship and the public good. The number one thing is looking for people who share the same passion. So when I was here in 1994, actually I was on the board of an organization called Social Venture Network, which was started by people like Wayne Silby of Calvert, Ben Cohen, Ben & Jerry, and others. And we had a board meeting here in Santa Barbara. And that, for me, was the first moment where I really met. I remember we were actually in Atlanta, and we had 300 people, all kind of sharing the same value and the same objective. How do we actually live the lives of entrepreneurs with our passion, with our purpose, and not, disconnected. Because many of us are a bit disconnected. We work, we make money, and then, we have families and we do good things at the weekend, but it's quite disconnected. And also, as investors, sometimes we're a bit schizophrenic. We want to make as much money as possible. At the same time, we are concerned about the planet, and so how do we combine the two? So in a way, when I discovered this B Corps, I immediately said, this is a very concrete community that has real people. Here you see some people who, so Clinton is a supporter of B Corps. Then you have people who run B Corps, like Jessica Alba, the Honest Company, which is now nearly $1 billion in value because the Chinese have bought a share. You have Yvon Chouinard, Patagonia. Here, the second row, you have Kat Taylor, who runs Beneficial Bank in San Francisco. She's the wife of Tom Steyer, the green billionaire. I mean, she's really going for it, a bank that serves people in the real sense of the word. Adam Laurie of Method, which is a clean detergent company, and so forth. And these are some of the faces of these 3,000 entrepreneurs who run the B Corps in 43 countries. What's the story? The story is, for about 20 years, we started certifying, products, processes, systems. Are they green? Are they ethical? And now the B Corp is actually a holistic assessment. We look at the company as a whole. And here are some figures. We talk about the new class of business, a class of companies that strive to integrate their kind of purpose and meaning with what they do. There are nearly 1,300 B Corporation, they are audited by us according to criteria I'll show you later. And then there are actually now nearly 1,800 in the United States that have become legally incorporated as benefit corporation. There is this, so in 30 states in the US, there is a new piece of legislation which is, rather than becoming an Inc., you become a B Corp, a benefit corporation. And we are expanding this beyond. Canada is working on it. Italy is working on it. Sweden would like to have the B Corp legislation. But at heart, it's not a legalistic innovation. But of course, having the legal instrument helps in framing and concretizing the intent of the shareholders or the owners to pursue, the wider public interest in what they do with their companies. So here we have a very short scheme. On the left, the benefit corporation. These are the kind of the route through the law. The B impact assessment is the auditing process that companies go through where there is no legislation. B Analytics is actually a very interesting separate division that works for investors. It has created the same sort of metrics, indicators, that are now used by 1,200 investment funds to actually select companies that meet this criteria. Generally, I'll show you the criteria, but you have to be well-governed, innovative, sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. And then Be the Change is a sort of civil society campaign. We have B Corps in about 6 countries in South America. They're very strong in engaging civil society. They have music festivals, and they talk about B Corps, and it's quite a movement. So with these 4 kind of, channels, we try to promote the idea of better companies. Why become a B Corp? Most important, maybe the number 1 and number 2 and number 3 at once, is about identity and brand. We find that companies that really are serious about their values, they want to be seen by everybody, by investors, by consumers, by their peers, as actually standing for something. And when we talk about business, generally, we see this huge homogeneous mass of companies, but in fact, they're not homogeneous. Companies of different sizes and kinds and cultures. So we think there is a real space here for a new community of businesses that stand for this. And then if you go down the list, you see, obviously, we connect them. They now have B Corps in 43 countries, so it's a global network. They can do business with each other. They can learn from each other, et cetera, et cetera. We influence policymakers. We have cities like City of New York started a whole campaign to get 80,000 companies in New York to learn from the existing B Corps, because they can actually learn from each other, and so on. But ultimately, it's about a better economy, and you can only get a better economy if you have better companies. Some of the logos of some of these companies, countries. This is when you become a B Corp, you sign the Declaration of Interdependence, and basically the idea, of course, that we are interdependent. If you think about the whole world, for example, the biggest company in Afghanistan, Roshan, is a mobile telecommunication company. They're a B Corp. And they employ 3,000 people. They have, I think, $600 or $700 million turnover. We have companies like this, in Lebanon, in South Africa, et cetera. So these companies recognize that we are all connected somehow, and the company cannot survive if the country where it operates is collapsing, or if, of course, the consumers are not, prosperous. So it's all very kind of interconnected. These are some of the concrete areas where the company gets measured. So there are about 200 criteria around all these clusters: governance, leadership, employees and talent, et cetera, et cetera. And if you score 80 out of 200, you can actually get the B Corp logo. All this is free. When you want to have the logo, then you pay a fee, which starts from $500 all the way to $50,000, depending on the size of the company. But as a whole, so this movement in the United States, Canada, South America, Europe, Australia, we are run as an NGO. We have a budget of about $10 million, funded about 50% by Foundation, Rockefeller, Skoll Foundation, and the rest is the fees that companies pay. So we are still largely, funded by philanthropists. But in Europe, we have a different model where we rely less on philanthropy and more on corporate fees. This is basically what the investors see. The investors they go online, they download information about companies. There are 30,000 companies in the database. They can see how these companies score according to all these criteria, and then they can decide, wow, it's a sort of due diligence. You fit my box here, you fit my box here. So it's very helpful for investors to have this kind of work being done by us. This is I think the final photo, but I'm going to say a couple more things. So this is Patagonia when it became a B Corp about 3 years ago. So what I want to say is, this is our rolling. 2 weeks ago we had a public launch in Amsterdam for Europe. We have now 70 companies, including a major bank that is present in 6 countries. They have about $15 billion assets, 60,000 corporate clients. They're working with us in promoting the idea of B Corps. We are now finalizing the assessment for Interface, the company that Ray Anderson started, the Green Carpets, and many others. So we are past the point of, is this really a movement? Is it only on the margin? And I think it's becoming more and more mainstream. Unilever would like to become a B Corp. They own Ben & Jerry, which is a B Corp, but we've been having serious conversations with them over the last 6 months, and it's very likely that they will try. I mean, they have to persuade the shareholders, but I think there's a very good chance. So we are on a roll with this. But my message is not really so much about the B Corp. I wanted to be concrete and show you this is really happening. But the message is much more about what Paxi is doing about innovation and impact, inspiration and impact. And I think that 25 years ago when I started on this journey, people would be critical, or they would ask, is this for real? It's just a bit of soft stuff, But actually now, after 25 years, I have so many examples of so many companies that are actually very successful, and they strive to sort of stay with their values and see themselves as Steve Jobs said, make a dent in the universe. We can make a difference in the world. And some of them are very small companies. There are a lot of young startups that want to become B Corps, and there are bigger companies. So at the end of the day, it's our own choice. This is why Paxi's book is so important, because it's our choice. We can actually run our lives in this way. Maybe closing an eye on things and cutting corners, or we can say, well, we want to live a life of integrity and stay with our values. And now the choice is, there are enough examples and models to say that it is possible. It is no longer just a dream. So that gives me a lot of encouragement. And I meet every day people who would like to try and just to live their lives in this way. And now that I'm a fellow Stanforder, yesterday we did a whole class for some of the MBA students, and we went like an hour over time. Everyone was so excited and interested, because if you can actually combine the two things, combine our humanity, wanted to be, human beings with meaning and purpose, and being successful in the real world, either running companies or being a leader, well, that's a pretty powerful combination. And why would one, go for less and choose an ordinary way? So it gives me a lot of encouragement, and I thank you. And if you have any questions after the panel, we can have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's because of my nonprofit and private sector background that I'm just fascinated by all these social enterprises, venture philanthropy, and impact investing. Marcelo will join us for Q&A in a bit, but first I'd like to introduce you to 3 other people who are featured in the book. Let's start with someone who is making a difference in our own backyard. There he is. He needs no introduction, really. Yes, give it up for Amir. A while back, when I sat down with the Mosher Foundation and met with Ed and Yvette and Ed Birch, and because I was looking for foundations who were driving venture philanthropy and interested in what they've learned while doing that. And when I asked them, who is one of your favorite impact makers, they said, Amir Abou-Shahir. And so many of you know, Amir started teaching an elective physics class at Dos Pueblos High School, and now he has a full-fledged Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, teaching more than 400 students. And this is not just education, it's quite innovative education, it's project-based learning. And this all happened not just because of his drive and his passion. Many of you have been involved in this endeavor, and the Mosher Foundation actually funded the curriculum when it was not quite yet proven. Venture philanthropy. So it all happened with you, this community, and he will speak a little bit more about that. His Santa Barbara connections are pretty clear, right? Since he's also a MacArthur Fellow, he's our city's official genius. So he will be, he will be sharing the stage with Dr. Bruce Chernoff. And Bruce is the president and CEO of the SCAN Foundation. He also serves as the chair of the Federal Commission on Long-Term Care. Bruce and his committee actually in fall 2013, delivered a report with 28 recommendations, and then they also testified to Congress. So he can speak to us a little bit more about the impact he's making on a national level. And his Santa Barbara ties are twofold. His father, Dr. David Chernoff, serves on the Santa Barbara Symphony Board. And this is how I learned, through a very proud father, of Bruce's adventures on a national level. And so he made the connection happen. And then Bruce also has a vineyard out in Ojai, and that's his second connection to the area. And today's wine, if you were on time, you were tasting some of the Ojai Alisal. And on your way out, he will be also serving Ojai Alisal. So that's the wine label that was launched last year from his vineyard. You will also meet Teresa Law. Teresa is the Chief Financial Officer of Mountain Hazelnuts Ventures. She's here with her business partner and husband, Daniel Spitzer. He's in the audience, and he will also be able to take questions. The two of them are running the only international social enterprise in the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. They're engaging 15% of the Bhutanese population, and they are determined in building a world-class hazelnut planting program, and also obviously production and export. And they are here today. I know that Daniel just came back from Bhutan, and Teresa has this amazing Santa Barbara connection I wasn't even aware of when I got connected to them through Don Saunders, and that is Teresa is a Westmont College graduate. So let's meet the panel. I hope you weren't too bored back there. They sat there the whole time, ladies and gentlemen. And you thought you had a hard time. So Amir, Teresa, and Bruce, Marcelo will join us in a minute. I only have one question for you. And then I would really like to open it up to you. Because what I want to do is to give you an opportunity, like I said, to chat the way I have with a couple of people from the book. And so please get your questions ready. We're supposed to be over 200 people here, so I'm expecting 300 questions, right? There's always one person who has a lot of questions, so let me start with Amir. So what happened? Why this passion? I mean, you were a high school teacher teaching an elective class. There's many high school teachers teaching a class. What was the initial passion?
So for me, I think ultimately I'm a problem solver, and I think intuitively I knew that something was not right with education. And as I just kept developing and working on what I was working on with my students, it just kept growing. And I think at the beginning it was just cool and fun and people were taking notice. But the intuition for kind of problem solving and kind of going forward with the idea led me to where I am now. And recently, folks have been coming in and they're saying, well, this is really exciting, but why? Why are you doing this? And I think it really boils down to authenticity in education. I think that every teacher hates it when they're teaching a class and the student raises their hand and says, why are we learning this? And they don't really necessarily have the right answer or a good answer. And I think it's because the system that we teach in and the system that we learned how to teach in has looked the way it has for so long that people just continue to do what was kind of done unto them, and they pass it on, and they don't really think about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's been systematized. And so as I've been working, I've been thinking like, well, how do we address this bigger picture question of what does authentic education look like, and why would we even care if it's authentic? And I think at the end of the day, I would like to see our students experiencing what they experience in their classrooms in an authentic way, what they will experience ultimately in the world that they're going to end up being a part of. And I think that we do simulations, we kind of manufacture kind of these simulated authentic experiences, but in general, why can't we actually create an environment which is truly authentic? And I believe that we should challenge ourselves to do that, and that's what we're trying to do at the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, because if you have not seen the facility, they have open houses and everything, and we'll give you all the information because it's quite amazing, and this is all in our own backyard. Teresa, a social enterprise, why not just a straight company or a nonprofit?
Well, I think there are very few examples of a social enterprise that really hits the triple bottom line of an economic return, a social return, and an environmental return. And especially to do something very old school, which is agriculture. So we're planting 10 million hazelnut trees among 15,000 orchards, nunneries, monasteries, schools, and farms in Bhutan. And we hope to double the income of 15% of the population. And we're planting hazelnuts, and who doesn't like hazelnuts, right? Nutella. So it was a niche market that had very good economics for us and our investors. But we also realized that it could do so much good in Bhutan, keeping farmers, giving them a sustainable income so that they would stay in their villages and farms, and also working to reforest and rehabilitate degraded mountain slopes. So we hit all of those triple bottom line figures, but also, NGOs, nonprofits, we've been involved in those, but they tend not to be sustainable once the funding dries up or the founders leave. And so this is an enterprise, with 50 years life to the trees at least. So we hope it's something that will continue after us.
Thank you. Thanks. So Bruce, many of us are dealing with long-term care because we have families in those situations, or obviously in a couple of decades we will be dealing with long-term care. What does every family need to know?
Well, thanks, Paxi, for having all of us. First of all, I think it's great to be here, and it's really a pleasure to be up here with these wonderful folks. I think for every family, the key thing to realize is the system you hope will be there when the time comes, it really isn't there. That's a really important takeaway here, and that we need to own the change, that we need to transform the way we think about aging, what it means to age in this country. So we have a system that's perfectly built for 1971. If you look at the major health solutions that exist as we age, whether it's Medicare or Medi-Cal, they were built in the mid-1960s, at a time when people lived maybe to 69 on average. And if you look at what people passed away from, mostly acute illnesses. And with all due respect to our federal and state policymakers, and yes, there have been some changes to those programs over time, they're not radically different today than they were when they were built. It kind of goes back to Amir's point about, are we perpetuating stable systems that are authentic today, not authentic for some time in the past? And to Teresa's point about, are they sustainable? So we built a system that was perfect for 1971 and makes no sense today. So people are going to live much longer. The average life expectancy is roughly 80. 70% of people over the age of 65 will have some long-term services and supports need. Now, I'm not saying a nursing home, maybe just a little bit of help at home, but they'll have some need in their life, and on average, they'll have that need for about 3 years. So this is not like being struck by lightning. We're all going to have a little bit of need as we get older. We're going to have that need because we're going to live with chronic illness and some functional limitation. And we need to reimagine how we deliver services beyond this medical model that looks a little like a mid-1970s disco ball. It was great back then, but it isn't going to deliver what we need today. So the foundation is really focused on changing that narrative, and what families need to know is it begins with you. What are your personal goals, and have you expressed them? How do you want to live your life? Then how are we making choices in the medical system we have today? There is good, better, and best out there. Are you working with, whether it's a health insurance plan or your choice of doctors, in ways that are helping you achieve your goals in life, not just making your medical problems look better? And then finally, we need to drive public policy to deliver a more innovative, more authentic, and certainly a more sustainable system than what we have now.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Marcello to join us and open it up. I have a million questions, so if you don't. Can we have the mic? Oh, you can if you're in easy reach, and if not, then the mic will come to you. If you can just state your first name, and then
My first name is Valentina.
tell me who the question is for.
Marcello.
Marcello.
Now,
Of course, Valentina, a
Italian
question for
connection.
Marcello.
We've rehearsed this question. No, I'm just kidding. Marcello, I'm very curious about what is the role of civic culture in a country, because you looked at many countries, big corporations in many countries. What is the role of civic and political culture on the creation of big corporations? In other words, are government more open, and therefore there is more opening in the society for big corporations, or the other way around? Thank you.
Thanks, Valentina. Maybe if I just widen it a little bit, not just the B Corporation, but the kind of culture that somehow encourages B Corporation or companies like B Corporations. So my own journey has been, I somehow, I think I'm kind of intuitive guy, so I wanted to go to those countries that were more progressive. So I ended up in the Netherlands. I worked a lot in Sweden and Denmark. And I helped the Danish government in the 90s set up the first center, called the Copenhagen Center, that actually looked at the role of business in society. And so my experience is basically Northern Europe is very progressive. They have also, and I will also add Germany and Switzerland, they have included in their kind of economic policies the notion that you cannot have a good economy without having good companies, which actually is, in the UK or in the US in a way, this has been a bit forgotten. Most economies actually never run companies. Most economies are macroeconomies. They think about money supply and the big picture, and they actually don't have experience of running companies. So I think that this is a very interesting trajectory going forward. That many more countries could and should understand that, in fact, you can't have good economy without good companies. And there was an article in the Financial Times last week by John Kay, which was making exactly the same point. So I think that some people are waking up to that idea. But the culture, I think that there are also varieties in terms of regions within countries. Even in our own country, Italy, a very different country. If you go to the north or the south or east and west, and likewise, I would say, even in the US, of course, there are lots of regional differences. We find now that some cities, so the city of New York I mentioned earlier, the new mayor, de Blasio, is very hot on this. So he's working with, he has set up a campaign with the B Lab to reach 80,000 companies to ensure that they at least use the experience of the B Corps and learn how to reach higher standards. But then last point is, I've witnessed this, for example, I was in London, I was a young entrepreneur in the early 80s. There was a time with Mrs. Thatcher. The UK used to be a fairly socialist country. And within 10 years, it became a fairly pretty entrepreneurial country. And I've seen this happening in Sweden, too. So the point I want to make is that these things are changeable. We can create the culture and the institution that we want. And so this is actually what I try to do with the B Corps, is to create that awareness that, in fact, it is in everyone's interest to have the best possible companies. And this is what society should also be calling for, the best possible companies. So we can actually change the culture. That's the final point. I've been a bit long-winded, but it is not an easy, so we can change cultures.
Can I tack on something? Because it reminds me of when we spoke, and it's in the book, you mentioned something really interesting, because I had a similar question about countries, because I was thinking in terms of countries, but you mentioned something like, if you could put 600 mayors of the largest cities together, they could actually be in a room, and you could drive enormous change. Can you speak a little bit to that? Is that happening? The 600 mayors getting in the room and...
Well, the bit before what you said is that McKinsey made a study about 3 or 4 years ago that I think I remember about 60-70% of the world economy goes through 600 cities. So basically, if you map the 600 cities in the world, the biggest 600 cities, so LA, London, New York, you basically get 60% of the world GDP. So basically, and of course, city mayors are not per se running the economies, but they have an impact in their own city, in their own neighborhood. So, I did some work with city mayors with the UN, many years ago. There are a number of people now who are working around the idea. There's even a guy, Barber, who wrote a book, What If City Mayors Ran the World? So there is actually happening in Sweden now in June a meeting of city mayors that are addressing this kind of question. What can we do ourselves in our own cities rather than always waiting for national governments? Right. National governments are stuck. International, it's even worse. So cities can do a lot.
Right. Yes.
I think a country like Bhutan, which focuses, and many of you have heard of gross national happiness, where they focus on some of these aspects in lieu of or in addition to economic growth. I think that's a valuable philosophy to have.
Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, in Bhutan, there are these measures of gross national happiness, which include where I think the Prime Minister was asked, what's your GNP? And he was mentioning that actually gross national happiness is an important indicator, probably more important than GNP. And these factors include social, religious, family, education, environment, all these metrics that I think some businesses have forgotten, and our business has to meet each of those measures.
That's interesting. So, next question.
Hi.
Please.
Hello, my name is Maggie. Several of you have mentioned people with a passion to create for the common good, as well as to make a profit, monetary profit. But one thing that concerns me is the emphasis on young people in high school and college, emphasizing what they call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Well, maybe some of you and some of the people whom you know grew up understanding that the common good is just as much valuable, if not more, than the individual good. Because without the common good, the individual goes way down. So I think that it would be really important for young people, instead of just studying sciences, to have some kind of grounding in what are the wider consequences of these wonderful products that they invent and these systems that they invent. For example, people may remember Vioxx. Vioxx is one of those drugs where perhaps you've seen advertisements these days. Oh, we'll cure your backache, but we'll give you side effect, heart disease, cancer, diabetes. The scientists who are creating these, I'll call them nefarious products, where is their view of the wider good? And this is not just in pharmacology, as you all know. So I think we must start teaching people, don't just be in it because your corporate taskmaster wants bigger profits. You have to look to your own conscience, but people have to be taught about their consciences, my opinion.
I think that's all these panelists will represent not just the profit. That's why Marcello spoke about the purpose beyond the profit. So that's exactly to your point. Anyone?
Yeah, well,
would like to
I
comment
have.
on that?
It reminds me of an amazing person. I only shook her hands, but so this is a lady. She's 30 years old. Her name is Elizabeth Holmes. She's the founder of Theranos. Now, Theranos is. You know that? You're making a. Oh yeah. So Elizabeth was 19 years old when she dropped out of Stanford because she had the passion. So her father worked with USAID. And he and she, as a girl, lived in many countries in Africa, and she wanted to do something meaningful about the health conditions of many people in Africa and developing countries. So she developed this idea of, with one drop of blood, she developed a whole series of 200 medical tests. They cost like $2 or $3 each. In comparison to the existing, hospital where they cost $20, $30, $40 each. And basically, she developed this company. She kept it secret for like 8 years. And now, I think a year or 2 years ago, went public. It's worth $4 billion. She owns half of it. And she hasn't had a day holiday in 11 years. And she's a pretty normal lady. But I mean, normal, when you see her, she could be anybody. But so, for me, that means this lady had a passion to do something for the world. And then she ended up being successful and being wealthy. But that's fine, as long as she did it very, ethically and very honestly, and she did something that everyone benefits from. So, everywhere you can find, well, she's an exceptional example, everywhere you can find people who connect the two and actually live their lives in that way. It's possible. I think, I think one of the big problems is that the educational system doesn't create these people so easily. That's probably why she also dropped out of Stanford, because, it's a problem, You don't get the kind of creative and integrative mindset very often.
Well, can I add, actually, Amir, I visited the academy, and you actually added art, so it's not STEM, it's STEAM, right? And also, because it's project-based learning, you teach them how to be an entrepreneur, how to write grants, how to work with other people, so it's not just the STEM part.
No, that's true. And I mean, going back also about just the happiness index that we were talking about, I think I'm going to kind of tie the whole thing together. I think that one of the issues that I'm seeing in schools is that students are not happy because of the lack of authenticity, because of the internal competition, because they feel like they have to just do better and take more classes and more tests and more this and more that. And they're feeling the pressure and the strain of that because of the fact that they aren't even seeing how it's connecting. They just feel like they're in a race to nowhere. I know some of you have seen that movie. And then with regard to teaching kind of to the whole person, the projects that we do, because we've incorporated the art aspect of it, we're not just kind of participating in science and technology in this kind of cold, hard, kind of factual way. We're really, at the end of the day, all of our projects are art projects. And our current capstone senior project that we're working on, that we've just completed, is actually an art installation that teaches people about science and engineering and really is meant to delight the community, and it's all about giving back to the community. So I think that we've embedded those key parts of the concerns into our educational program so that we can help with these issues.
Right. And I know, Teresa, you bring in Stanford students to come and work, help out in Bhutan.
Right. So over the past 5 years, we've had, I think, 17 Stanford students, business school students and design school for extreme affordability, who come in the summers or during the school year and work on projects. We are very thinly funded, and we're trying to build a company. We now have 600 employees, so we're the largest private sector employer in Bhutan. But we really don't have some of the skills that these international Stanford students have. So they've come and donated their time and work on projects, whatever it is that we need them to do, whether it's training, designing a low-cost dehusker dry machines. And I think that they really come out of this 8 to 12-week experience understanding what it's like to work in a social enterprise. And we've been very pleased because a few of them have gone on to start or to work in other social impact investment.
Right. So that's also beyond just, what she was referring to, right? Mm-hmm. Just the engineering or just the business part of it. You're creating an expanded perspective for them as well as students. So that's wonderful. Any more questions?
My name is Bob. Teresa, I'm very curious, how and why did you all become involved in Bhutan? How did that come about?
So, okay, my husband and I actually have been in Asia since about 1985. We met as bankers in Chicago, so we've had long careers in banking and finance. Then in 1993, he started a social enterprise in China, which worked with 700,000 farmers, and that was sold 10 years later to an international company. So he was looking around for something to do, and our chief scientist said, "Hey, have you heard of hazelnuts?" Well, of course, we've all heard of hazelnuts and eaten them, but we didn't realize that it was such a niche product with high barriers to entry, good profit margins, and not easily grown. So we started that company, started trying to do that in China, and around the same time, Bhutan had its first democratic election. So it caught our attention, and to our surprise and delight, Bhutan is actually ideally suited agroclimatically to grow hazelnuts. And then when we got there, we realized what a wonderful opportunity this would be to be in Bhutan when it's at an inflection point, when there's been so much change occurring. So with our 600 staff, about half are women. Many of them are, only about 10% have university degrees. So we have a lot of young people who are learning to be managers and first-time jobs for a lot of the women. And so we just think that all of this just kind of came together, and we wouldn't have had that opportunity, I think, in any other country. So Bhutan was just a very special place for us.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wally, and the question is for Bruce. You were mentioning that we need to change the system to take care of the aging population, and that the system was designed in the 70s and so on. But there was an implication that the problem is between the old person or the aging population and the government. But we're not mentioning the family. How do they participate in caring of the aging person? Marcello said that we can change the culture, and unfortunately the culture right now here in the States is that we are really busy working to support ourselves. We don't have time to support our old relatives or parents and so on. Is there any way we can do to change the culture, maybe provide some kind of incentive to the young people, financial incentive so they can take care of their older, and we're talking about benefits, and taking care of your old people is a great benefit.
So that's a wonderful question. And when it comes to the issue of aging, it really, you're getting at the heart of what a transformed system looks like. What government programs can provide are a set of tools when there is some specific need that needs to be addressed, but it is a toolbox, and it's great to have a hammer and it's great to have a screwdriver. But at the end of the day, if you don't need a hammer and a screwdriver, that's a problem. And so a whole solution in aging really does require the involvement of family and community. So let's spend a moment on that. If you were to monetize the amount of family caregiving provided in the United States today, the AARP has looked at this, it's about $450 billion a year. So today, families are a very important part of the support structure for vulnerable older people. Demographics are really changing. So the demography of today will look very different for late boomers, millennials, and Gen Xers. And the reality is that there are more single adults, adults without families, so adults who will live in isolation without big families around them. And so the notion of support that you're describing, whether it's family or community and friends, is incredibly important. Yes, there are things that we can do to help encourage that kind of growth in families and in communities. So for example, family, and what is government's role in encouraging that and helping create and foster those opportunities? Family medical leave is really important, and broadening that opportunity to allow folks to be able to spend time caring for family members and to see that as part of their role is a very important, a singular but very important example. Growing programs that allow young people to provide or to give service, as we have Peace Corps around the world, we have AmeriCorps doing work here in the United States. Those programs can be grown to allow younger people to understand and value what it means to support family members and communities. So there's a lot we can do to reimagine aging, and to reimagine it in a way that is not purely in a medical context. That is about helping people live their lives, and in the homes that they choose, in the communities that they choose. And that definition is incredibly important. Let me stop there.
So how can people get involved with the things that you're doing, like especially on a national level? I mean, the political process, how can any individual have a voice in that process? It's like voting and...
Absolutely. So I think, one of the things that's interesting to me now, and I deal with lots of elected officials, whether they're, I spent time with the mayor's staff in Los Angeles today, and, my work will take me to Washington and to the Hill and to the White House. And it's so interesting to me that one of the most common things I hear is, gee, I hear from my constituents all the time about, and then it turns into a Mad Lib. So it could be, in California, it's water. Everybody wants to talk about water, which is great. We need to talk about water. But it is, to a T, people don't view aging as a public policy issue. We treat aging very much as what I call a bedroom issue. It's something we deal with inside our own families or inside our very narrow circle of friends, when in fact it should be a dining table issue. We should expect that our public policy would evolve to support and sustain people as they age in their communities, the same way we would address traffic safety or environmental issues or anything else in this country. So getting involved in just the simplest ways, by writing a letter or sending an email to an elected official, is always a good place to start. There are other ways to get involved in aging and in your community, and seeking those opportunities, whether they're participating in things like AARP activities or local coalitions that are focusing on issues that are important. Almost every city has an agency on aging that has a commission that helps advise its agenda. So I think, starting at home, starting with, if you're a faith-based person, starting with your faith-based community, starting with your local municipal government, and looking for ways to get involved. But I actually think it starts with us first, and then it pushes upstream.
So, and Teresa, for you, how can people get involved with, what it is that you're doing?
Well, we could always use some help in something. One of the things we do is, for instance, we've developed an Android technology to connect our monitors to the farms. So our farmers are visited every 30 to 45 days. And we monitor the plant growth, we give them advice on plant health. And so, we've actually reached out to some people in the technology area to see if they could help us move up in that capacity. But we haven't really gotten any nibbles. So, and we could certainly use other kinds of help. But generally, we tend to not bring in anyone who doesn't have an extensive experience.
And Amir, for you?
I think that the biggest thing that I see in terms of education is, in terms of supporting it, is to realize that there is no funding stream for innovation. And so if society is going to expect that innovation is just going to happen and there's no funding stream, it just isn't going to happen. The only reason that I've been able to do what I've been able to do is because of this community and because of the folks that have come forward and really helped me. There was nowhere that I could actually go to just say, hey, I have this great idea, and then I go to the state and write a grant for innovative ideas. And so I think that we spend a lot of money on education, but we don't in the same way that we encourage innovation in business. There's in a business setting, if I had what I have, which is effectively an entrepreneurial venture, after putting in the sweat equity, I could go and I could seek venture capital. And if you're a teacher and you're not as tenacious and kind of I guess, a little bit crazy like me, where you just go, hey, we can do this, we can do anything. And I mean, the way this all started, I mean, I didn't know about how to do philanthropy, how it could impact the schools. The way this started is I wrote a grant to the state of California for $3 million for a building, and I had to match that grant. And that just threw me into the whole thing of how do you raise money. And some parents came together and worked with me, and we started a nonprofit, and it was through that process of doing that kind of, I think, a pretty odd thing to do. I mean, I don't think most people would say, hey, your teacher, go write a grant. Who was writing these grants? Districts were writing these grants. Teachers weren't writing them. But I wanted so badly to transform our school and to offer students an opportunity that when I saw the grant was available, I said, well, we've got to do this for our community. And again, the community stepped in. But this is a very unique community and a very unique set of people that came and helped me. And so when I think, it's hard now because I go around and I talk to other teachers and they say, well, how do I do what you've done? And depending on where they live, do they have the ability to even start that entrepreneurial venture? And I think the answer is no. So I think one of the things we could do is really talk to, and try to convince politicians and even just the political powers that be that in addition to just funding education and supporting it and sustaining it, we need to figure out how we can encourage innovation in that sector. And if we don't, we're going to have the same education system forever.
So I guess my question is, we live in a very wealthy country, right? There's just a phenomenal amount of wealth in America, no matter how you look at it. But we still have these really intractable problems. If anybody's paying attention to the news, you see what's happening in Baltimore and St. Louis, and there's really huge swaths of our population that are getting left behind. And we see sectors like the tech sector that growing like crazy, and people are really thriving, banking and other sectors. And I guess my question is, one is, you talk about all of you are really impact makers. You are leading change. But for a lot of people, that's a really hard bar to step up and be that kind of leader and change maker. I think for many people, it's easier to help and amplify change that's happening already. And we see so many ways today, like social media, et cetera, that people can really help amplify. And I guess one question I'd have for any one of you wanted to answer is how can we help you? Like some of us have a passion and maybe we can figure out how to drive the way you have. But really, for many of us, it's how can we help the people that are already doing the things and already have the vision for the future?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about the gentleman who asked about health and connected with your question. So, for example, I completely believe that we have kind of opened the box, the Pandora's box, and this kind of gene of entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship is unstoppable. So the future, in a way, is going to be much more about individuals doing things, whether they do them as entrepreneurs on their own or collectively, but away from big government. I mean, big government could still try to stay as big government, but the real power of innovation isn't going to come from big government. So one concrete example that somehow matches your both inputs. In the Netherlands, where Paxi actually lived for many years, we have our health system is largely cooperative. So most of Dutch citizens belong to a cooperative that basically self-administer their own health system. So we have some of the lowest cost of health in Europe and in the world, and it works. And one of the latest innovations, which actually come to the United States from the Netherlands, is actually a citizens-led health system that started by citizens, already serving 3 million consumers in the Netherlands. And they are now busy getting this going on the East Coast in the US.
Buurtzorg?
It's called Buurtzorg, yeah.
It's in the book. And we didn't even talk about this.
Well, so this is one example, the Netherlands, because we are from the Netherlands, etc. But there are countless examples like this. The US is a very creative country. I've been a friend of Bill Drayton, founder of Ashoka, for 25 years. Ashoka is a network of 3,000 social entrepreneurs. There are more Americans doing work all around the world than maybe in the United States. So I think you have to flip it around and start doing much more in the United States. And the energy is there, the people are there, but the system is broken. Politics is broken in the US, like it is broken in Russia and in other countries. So that is the power, is people just creatively and collaboratively do things in their own society, in their own community, just like Bruce said, in their own cities. I mean, I think that, this is a great country, but you have a problem with politics, and you have also a problem that it's, I see this as, Europe is by no means a perfect place, but we have a very interesting example where we have 35 countries in Europe, and basically, actually, you may be laughing, but, we learn a lot from each other. So the Germans can learn from the Dutch, from the English, from the Italians. There's a very thriving, process of learning. Diversity is really helping. And in the US, unfortunately, you're one big country, and you don't have that same, 35 countries basically working together in what we call the European Union. So, so I think there is the benefit for the US is actually because you have also people from all around the world working and setting up companies in the US, is work much more with the creative energy of entrepreneurs on a more kind of localized approach.
I think what's next is really for you to connect with them on an individual basis and ask them how you can support them. There are many other impact makers in our community. And please, I'll see you outside in the courtyard. Thank you so much.